Did you know a heart can break twice over the same wound? The first time is when the people who are supposed to love you most push a knife into your back. The second time is when you're the one who has to pull it out and hand it back to them. Handle first. My name is Claire Gonzalez, and I am 34 years old. Today, I hold an eviction notice in my hand. It has my parents' names on it. And my signature is at the bottom, right next to the line that says, Landlord. You might call me cruel, but stick around. If you stay until the end of my story, you'll see this isn't revenge. It's justice. I've always been the responsible one. While my brother Asher was chasing dreams and racking up debt, I was working. I put myself through nursing school with scholarships and 2 part-time jobs. I worked nights in the emergency room, holding the hands of strangers, while my own hands were calloused and tired. I saved every penny. I ate ramen noodles, drove a 10-year-old car, and never asked for a thing. I believed in hard work. I believed in character. My parents told me they were proud of my independence. I now know that was just a pretty word for being left alone. If you have ever felt like the forgotten child, the one who had to grow up too fast while a sibling got to be young and careless, then my story is your story. Please, I'm asking you, I'm begging you, subscribe and come on this journey with me. Your support isn't just a number to me. It's a quiet whisper that says, I see you. You are not alone. It's the validation I never got from my own family, and it means more to me than you could ever know. I need to know I'm not screaming into the void. The day it all shattered was a sunny Tuesday. I remember the birds were singing, which felt like a sick joke. I had just finished a brutal 16-hour shift. My whole body ached, but my heart was full because I had finally saved enough for a small down payment on a tiny condo. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I went to my parents' house, excited to share the news. But when I walked in, they were celebrating. Champagne bottles were on the counter, and my brother Asher was holding a set of house keys. A big, beautiful 5-bedroom house in the suburbs. Isn't it wonderful? My mother cried, hugging me. Her perfume made me feel sick. We helped Asher with the down payment. He's finally settling down. She said it so casually, as if she were announcing they'd bought a new toaster. I just stood there, my own good news turning to ash in my mouth. A down payment. They gave him a down payment. The words echoed in the sudden silence of my mind. I looked at my dad, who wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared into his champagne glass as if it held all the answers in the world. Please take a second to comment where you're watching this from. I want to read every single city and state, to feel a connection to all of you who might understand this feeling of being invisible in your own family. I truly believe that for every person who shares their home with me in the comments, a special kind of peace and unexpected blessing will find its way to your own home and your loved ones this week. You all deserve the loyalty and love that you so freely give to others. Let's build a community right here. I finally found my voice. How much? I whispered. My brother shuffled his feet. My mother's smile tightened. Now, Claire, that's not polite. It was a gift, but I wouldn't let it go. I looked at Asher, my voice getting stronger. How much, Asher? He mumbled a number that made the air leave my lungs. $250,000. $250,000. They had given him enough money to change his entire life, to give him a future I had been bleeding for, shift by grueling shift, for the past 10 years. Then came the moment that broke me. I looked at my parents, my eyes begging for an explanation, for some sign that this was a mistake, that they hadn't forgotten me. My father finally looked up. He cleared his throat and gave me a tired, patronizing smile. Claire, we are so proud of you, he began, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. You've always been so good with money. We knew you wouldn't need our help. We've given you something far more valuable than money. We gave you the gift of character, the motivation to build it all yourself. The gift of character. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp, like pieces of broken glass. They weren't giving me a lecture on saving. They were giving me a reason for my sacrifice. They were punishing my success and rewarding my brother's failure. They saw my struggle not as something to be eased, but as proof that I didn't need them. In that moment, I realized they didn't see me as their daughter. They saw me as their retirement plan, their safety net. The responsible one who would always be there to clean up the messes. Something inside me didn't just break. It hardened into steel. Smiled. It was a strange, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply turned and walked out the door, leaving the champagne and the celebration behind. They thought they were just giving my brother a house. They had no idea they had just given me a mission. They had no idea about the other secret, the one I had been keeping from my father for years. The secret that was about to become my weapon. And they certainly had no idea that the very roof over their heads didn't actually belong to them anymore. Belonged to me. I didn't drive home. I drove to the ocean. I parked my old rattling car and just stared at the waves. Each one crashed on the shore, washing away the sand, only for the next one to do it all over again. Felt like my life. I'd spend years building something, being responsible, being the strong one, and then the next wave of my family's needs would come and wash it all away. But as I sat there, watching the gray water churn, I realized something. Waves don't just take away. They also reveal what's underneath. And what was underneath all my pain and sacrifice was a foundation of lies. They're lies. And I was the one holding the deed to the whole rotten house. It all started 5 years ago with a phone call. It wasn't my mother who called. It was always my father when the news was bad. He sounded quiet, broken. "Claire Bear," he'd said, using a childhood nickname that felt like a little pinprick to my heart. "I need your help. It's a bit of a financial mess. Please don't tell your mother. She would just worry herself sick." Mess. That's what he called it. It was the first thread in a lie that would unravel his entire life. And I was the one he chose to help him hide it. He didn't ask Asher. Asher was too busy finding himself on a trip to Europe, funded by them, of course. What would you have done? When the father you adore asks you for a secret, for help that only you can give, do you say no? He came to my tiny apartment, the one I could barely afford, and laid it all out. He'd made some bad investments. He was behind on the mortgage for the house I grew up in. He needed $20,000, or the bank would start proceedings. I looked at my own bank account, at the numbers I had cried and bled for. It was my entire savings, my dream of a down payment. He promised he would pay me back in 6 months. It was just a loan, he said. Secret favor. The 6 months came and went. There was no money. Instead, there was another phone call. Another bad investment. He needed more. I gave it to him. I took on extra shifts, working until my feet were numb and my eyes burned from exhaustion. I lived on coffee and the granola bars I'd stuff in my pockets. Meanwhile, my mother would call and tell me about the new golf clubs they'd bought for Asher's birthday, or the weekend trip they were taking to the coast. Each word was another twist of the knife. They had money for my brother's wants, but I was the one paying for their needs. This went on for 2 years. A slow, agonizing drain of my money, my energy, and my future. I was drowning. Finally, the mess got too big. The bank was threatening foreclosure for real this time. My father came to me with a new plan. His eyes filled with fake tears. "The only way to protect the house is to put it in your name," he said. "We'll sign it over to you. You'll take over the mortgage payments officially. Just paperwork, Claire Bear. It's to protect our family home." He made it sound like he was doing me a favor, like he was protecting my inheritance. And I, the good daughter, the responsible one, agreed. I signed the papers. I went to the bank. I legally became the owner of my childhood home. The home my parents were living in, rent-free. The mortgage was huge, far more than what was left on it. I found out he had taken out a second mortgage, pulling all the value out of the house. I asked him where all that money had gone, but he just shook his head and talked about interest rates and the bad economy. He was a good liar. He knew how to make his irresponsibility sound like misfortune. One day I was helping him clean out the garage. Another favor, of course. He had asked me to sort through some old boxes. In a dusty shoebox filled with old receipts, I found it. It was a birthday card. A kid's card with a cartoon rocket on it. It wasn't for Asher. It wasn't for me. It was for a little boy named Leo. Inside, my father's familiar handwriting said, "To my brave little man on your 5th birthday. I'm so proud of you. Love, Daddy." My heart stopped. Who was Leo? I looked at the back of the card and saw a woman's name scribbled in pencil. Maria. That night, I confronted him. The truth finally came out, not in a rush, but in a slow, ugly trickle. The bad investments weren't investments. They were payments. 4 years, my father had another family in the next state over. Secret life. Maria was his other partner and Leo was his son. My half-brother. All the money, the second mortgage, the money I had been giving him, it was all going to them. To build them a life while I was sacrificing my own to keep a roof over his head. His real family's head. He broke down, begging me not to tell my mother. It would destroy her, Claire. Please. It's my mess, let me fix it. Kept his secret. I kept it because I couldn't bear to be the one to break my mother's heart. I thought I was protecting her. I carried this horrible, heavy knowledge inside me every single day. I kept paying the mortgage on their house, the house that now felt like a crime scene. I kept quiet while they praised Asher for breathing and criticized me for not visiting enough. I swallowed my pain and let it turn into a hard, cold ball in the pit of my stomach. I was protecting everyone but myself. I was their shield and they had no idea. But that day at Asher's housewarming party, when my father looked me in the eye and gave me that lecture about the gift of character, the shield didn't just crack, vaporized. They hadn't just given my brother a down payment. They had given him my money, my sacrifice, my future. And they had wrapped it up in a self-righteous lecture. As I sat in my car by the ocean, the cold ball of pain in my stomach finally ignited. It wasn't pain anymore. It was rage. Pure, clean, and crystal clear. I picked up my phone, my hands perfectly steady. I didn't call a lawyer. Called my mother. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice calm and sweet. "I need you and Dad to come over tomorrow. There's some paperwork about the house we need to discuss. And also, I'd love for you to finally meet your grandson, Leo." The silence on the other end of the phone was so loud it felt like a scream. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound was my own steady breathing. Then my mother's voice, tight and confused, crackled through the speaker. "Leo? What are you talking about, Claire? Who is Leo? Is this some kind of sick joke?" I could hear my father in the background. His voice a low, panicked mumble, asking who was on the phone. My mother shushed him. Her attention was all on me, a laser beam of suspicion and annoyance. She thought this was a game. She had no idea I was holding the match to her entire world. I didn't answer her question. I didn't need to. The bomb had been planted. It would go off soon enough. "Be at my apartment tomorrow at 10 in the morning," I said, my voice as calm and flat as the ocean on a windless day. "We have things to discuss about the house. And Dad, you'll want to be there." Before she could argue, before she could demand answers, I ended the call. Hanging up on my mother was something I had never done in my entire life. It felt like stepping off a cliff, but instead of falling, I found out I could fly. The power was intoxicating. What do you do when you know you're about to destroy the people who gave you life? Do you feel guilt? Do you feel sorrow? I felt nothing but a cold, hard clarity. I spent that night not sleeping but preparing. I gathered every document. The deed to the house with my name on it, years of mortgage statements showing payments from my account, my own bank records showing the massive transfers to my father. I laid them all out on my small coffee table. Each piece of paper was a brick in the wall of their lies, and I was about to make them look at every single one. They arrived at 10 exactly. My father looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His face was pale and slick with sweat. My mother, on the other hand, marched in like a general ready for battle. She was dressed in her expensive Sunday clothes, ready to put her difficult, ungrateful daughter back in her place. They stood awkwardly in my tiny living room, a room smaller than their master closet. The air was thick with things unsaid, a silence buzzing with accusation and fear. My mother started first, her voice sharp. "All right, Claire. What is this all about? And what was that nonsense about a grandson?" I didn't say a word. I just pointed to the couch. They sat down, stiff and uncomfortable. I sat across from them in my old armchair and gestured to the coffee table. "Let's start with the house," I said, my voice even. I slid a copy of the deed toward them. "As you both know, I am the legal owner of 125 Elm Street. I have been for 5 years." My mother scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "It was just a technicality, Claire, to protect the property. You know your father's business was struggling." She looked at my father for support, but he just stared at the papers, his jaw tight. "It was more than a technicality," I continued, pushing the stack of mortgage statements towards them. "It was a debt I have been paying every single month for 60 months. From my salary. The salary I earned working double shifts while Asher was finding himself in Thailand." My mother's face began to lose its angry certainty, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "We paid you back for some of that," she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "We helped you out here and there." I just stared at her, letting the lie hang in the air between us. We all knew it wasn't true. Then I looked directly at my father. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape he couldn't find. "Where did the $250,000 for Asher's down payment come from?" I asked quietly. He opened his mouth, then closed it. My mother answered for him. "Your father's investments finally paid off. We were so thrilled to be able to help your brother get a start. An investment paid off." The lie was so bold, so ridiculous that I almost laughed. This was the story he had fed her, and she had swallowed it whole. It was time to show her the truth. "There were no investments," I said, my voice like ice. "He took out a second mortgage on the house. The house I own. The mortgage I pay." My mother's head whipped towards my father. "Richard, is that true?" My father's face crumpled. He looked old and small. "It was complicated," he stammered. "I was going to pay it back before anyone knew." My mother was still processing it, the betrayal from her husband mixing with the anger at me for revealing it. She was about to scream at me. I could see it building in her eyes. She still thought this was about the money. But this was never just about the money. It was about the reason for the lies. I reached under my chair and pulled out the last piece of my evidence. It wasn't a document. It was a photograph. The one I had found in the garage. A picture of a smiling little boy on a swing set, my father's arm wrapped around him. "The money didn't go to investments, and it didn't disappear into thin air, Dad," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I slid the photo across the coffee table and placed it directly in my mother's hands. "It went to him. Leo, your grandson." My mother stared down at the photograph. Her whole body went rigid. The color drained from her face, leaving her skin a pasty, sickly white. She looked from the smiling boy to my father's terrified face, and then back to the photo. A sound escaped her lips, a terrible, wounded gasp, like all the air was being punched out of her lungs. The carefully constructed world of her perfect family, her faithful husband, and her loving children didn't just crack. In the space of a single heartbeat, right there in my tiny living room, it exploded into a million pieces of dust. My mother looked at the photograph like it was a snake. She dropped it on the coffee table as if it had burned her fingers. Her face, which had been pale, was now a blotchy red. She didn't look at my father. She looked at me. Her eyes were filled with a wild, terrible fire. "You did this," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "You brought this filth into our lives. How long have you known? How long have you been hiding this, plotting this little scene?" She thought I was the enemy. For a crazy second, I was the one who had the affair, the one who had lied. I was just the messenger, but she was aiming the gun at me. My father, seeing her anger aimed at me, seemed to find a tiny sliver of courage. "Linda, don't," he pleaded, reaching for her hand. She snatched it away like his touch was poison. "Don't you dare speak to me, Richard." Her voice was dangerously low. Then she turned back to me. Answer me, Claire. How long have you been a part of his disgusting secret? It was the ultimate betrayal. After all I had done to protect her, to carry the weight of his sins so she wouldn't have to, she was accusing me of being his partner in crime. The last little bit of warmth I had for her, the tiny flicker of pity, died. If you have ever been blamed for something you didn't do, especially by someone you love, you know the special kind of pain that comes with it. Feels like being pushed underwater. Please tell me in the comments if you've ever felt that way. You don't have to share the story, just let me know I'm not alone in this feeling. Your comment is a hand reaching down to pull me up for air. I need that right now. I need to know this community understands that sometimes, the ones we try to protect are the quickest to turn on us. I looked my mother dead in the eye. My voice was no longer calm. It was cold steel. I have known for 5 years. I have known since the day he came to me, crying, begging for my life savings to stop the bank from taking your house. I have known through every fake story about bad investments. I have known every time you called to tell me about a new toy you bought for Asher while I was working overtime to pay the mortgage on a house I don't even live in. I kept this secret to protect you. I carried this filth so you wouldn't have to smell it. Every word was a hammer blow. My mother flinched. The anger in her eyes faltered, replaced by a dawning, horrifying understanding. She finally turned her gaze to my father, who was now visibly shaking. It was as if she was seeing him for the first time. Not as her husband of 40 years, but as a stranger. A liar who had built their entire life on a foundation of sand. "Richard," she whispered, the word full of a pain so deep it physically hurt to hear it. "Is it true? All of it?" He couldn't speak. He just nodded, his head bowing in shame. And the dam broke. My mother didn't scream. It was worse. A low, guttural wail came from her chest, a sound of pure agony. It was the sound of a heart not just breaking, but being torn apart, piece by piece. She sank back into the couch, her body limp, her face a mask of unbelievable grief. "A son," she choked out, looking at nothing. "You have another son." My father started to babble, excuses and apologies tumbling out of his mouth. "It was a mistake. She meant nothing to me. I was going to tell you." The words were meaningless, pathetic little shields against the hurricane of his betrayal. I let them sit in the wreckage for a moment. I let the terrible truth fill every corner of my small apartment. They had forgotten I was there. They were lost in their own private hell. But I wasn't finished. The truth about the affair was just the beginning. This was about justice. "There's more you don't know," I said, my voice cutting through his pathetic excuses. "You think Maria, Leo's mother, is just some woman he had a fling with? You have no idea who she really is, do you, Dad? You don't know what she told me when she called me last month, begging me for help." My father's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a new kind of terror. He didn't know Maria had contacted me. He thought he was the one managing his 2 separate lives, keeping them from ever touching. He thought he was in control. But a secret that big is never truly under control. It's a living thing, and it always finds a way out into the light. My mother's crying subsided, replaced by a morbid curiosity. "What?" she asked, her voice raspy. "What about her?" I was about to tell her, about to reveal the next layer of my father's lies, a lie that was even darker than the affair itself. But I stopped. That was a weapon for another day. Today was about the house. I stood up and walked over to the coffee table, picking up the eviction notice I had printed that morning. I had filled it out before they arrived. It was a legal document, 30 days to vacate the premises. My premises held it out. My father was too stunned to take it, so my mother, moving like a robot, reached out and took the paper from my hand. She read the words, her eyes slowly tracking across the page. Her face, already a canvas of shock and grief, somehow found space for one more emotion. Pure, unadulterated disbelief. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling as she held the paper. I looked at both of them, my 2 parents, the 2 people who were supposed to protect me and love me unconditionally. They looked small and broken, sitting on my cheap couch in my tiny apartment. I felt a flicker of something, a ghost of pity, but I stamped it out. Pity was a luxury I couldn't afford, a weakness they had used against me for years. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "It's an eviction notice. I want you out of my house." My mother held the eviction notice like it was a dead thing. Her hand trembled, the paper shaking with the force of her shock. For a moment, there was no sound but the ticking of the cheap clock on my wall. Each sound was a second of their old life disappearing forever. My father was the first to speak, a choked, broken laugh escaping his lips. "This is a joke," he said, looking at me, his eyes begging me to agree. "A cruel, terrible joke. You wouldn't do this to us, Claire Bear. You wouldn't throw your own mother and father out on the street. Tell me you wouldn't." His use of my childhood nickname, a name he once used to ask for favors and money, now felt like acid on my skin. My mother finally found her voice, and it was filled with the fury of a woman who had just lost everything. "You are a monster," she spat, the words sharp and ugly. "After everything we did for you, after we raised you, this is how you repay us. By making us homeless. Your brother gets a house, and you get your revenge. Is that it? Are you happy now, seeing us like this?" She still didn't get it. She thought this was about jealousy, not justice. I stood up and walked to my tiny kitchen window, looking down at the gray street below. I didn't turn to face them when I spoke. "This isn't revenge, Mother. This is a lesson. The one you both taught me. Remember, at Asher's party, you told me you gave me the gift of character, the strength to stand on my own 2 feet. Well, I'm standing. And these are my 2 feet on the floor of my apartment, which I pay for. And that is my house, which I also pay for. I'm just making a responsible financial decision. You should be proud. Please," my father begged, his voice cracking. He stood up and took a step toward me, but stopped when I didn't turn around. "Claire, think about your mother. This news about Leo. It's destroyed her. She can't handle this. We have nowhere to go. My savings, they're gone." He said it as if his savings had vanished by magic, as if he hadn't willingly poured them into his secret life, into a down payment for his favorite child. He was trying to use my mother's pain, the very pain he caused, as a shield to protect himself from the consequences. I finally turned to face them. My face was a mask of calm. Felt nothing. The part of me that could feel pity for them had been burned away. "You have somewhere to go," I said simply. "Asher has a beautiful new 5-bedroom house. A house you bought for him. There's plenty of room. I'm sure your son, the one you invested in, will be happy to take you in. After all, you didn't burden him with character-building lessons. You burdened him with $250,000. He owes you." The look on their faces told me they had never even considered it. My mother let out a bitter laugh. "Burden Asher? We can't do that. He has a new wife, a new life. We can't just show up on his doorstep with our suitcases." The hypocrisy was so thick I could barely breathe. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "It was okay for me to be your bank, your therapist, and your secret keeper for 5 years. I could carry the burden of your lies and your debts. But you, the parents, can't be a burden on your own son for a few weeks. The one who has everything because I was given nothing." Just then my phone started to ring. The screen lit up with a picture of my smiling brother. Course, they must have called him, crying, before they even came over. I looked at my parents, then answered the call and pressed the speaker button. Asher's angry voice filled the small room before I could even say hello. "Claire, what the hell is going on? Mom is hysterical. She said you're kicking them out of the house. You need to stop this pathetic, jealous game right now and apologize to them." He didn't ask for my side. He never did. He just assumed I was the one in the wrong. "Hello, Asher," I said, my voice dripping with ice. "I'm not playing a game. The house is legally mine. And Mom is hysterical because Dad has been lying to her for over a decade. Turns out you and I have a little brother named Leo. Dad's been funding his secret family with money he stole from the house." There was dead silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Asher breathing. "You're lying," he finally whispered. "You're making it up because you're jealous of my new house." It was his only defense, to believe I was a monster rather than believe our father was. That was when I decided to light the final fuse. I knew a secret my father didn't know I knew. The one Maria had told me on the phone when she had called me, woman to woman, looking for help. "I'm not lying, Asher," I said, my eyes locked on my father's terrified face. "Ask Dad about Maria. And while you're at it, ask him why she was so desperate for money. Ask him why our little brother Leo is sick. Ask him about the hospital bills he stopped paying right after he gave you the down payment for your perfect new life." My father made a sound, a strangled cry, and lunged for the phone, trying to snatch it from my hand. "Don't you talk about him," he screamed, his face purple with rage and fear. But it was too late. I pulled the phone away and ended the call, leaving Asher in a world of shocked silence. I looked at my parents, the two people who had created this storm, now drowning in it. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably, and my father looked like a cornered animal. 30 days, I said, my voice as final as a judge's sentence. Or my next call is to your pension manager. I wonder if they know about your undeclared financial dependent. My father froze, his hand still outstretched towards the phone he had failed to grab. The threat about his pension was a shot in the dark, but from the look on his face, I knew it had hit its target. The rage drained from his eyes, replaced by a pure, animal panic. He looked like a man watching his escape route crumble into dust. My mother, who was still lost in a fog of grief, seemed to latch onto this new piece of the puzzle. "Pension?" she asked, her voice a hoarse whisper. "What does his pension have to do with any of this?" She looked at me, her eyes begging for an answer that made sense in a world that no longer did. I kept my gaze locked on my father. "Your husband has been lying on official documents for years," I explained, my voice calm and steady. "A pension plan has rules about dependents, especially when a child is involved. An investigation would freeze everything. They would want to know where hundreds of thousands of dollars disappeared to. They would want to know about Leo. It would be a long, messy, and very public process. You would lose everything you have left." I wasn't entirely sure if that was true, but my father's face told me he believed it. He had built his life on secrets, and the thought of a spotlight being shined on them was his greatest fear. "What's the deepest secret you've ever had to keep for someone else? Did it feel like a heavy coat you couldn't take off, even on the hottest day? I feel like I've been wearing that coat for years, and I'm finally letting it fall to the floor. If you've ever felt that weight, please just type 'I understand' in the comments. I want to see a wave of you who get what it feels like to carry a burden that isn't yours. Your understanding gives me the strength to stand here, shivering but free, and see this through to the end." My father finally collapsed onto the couch. All the fight was gone. He looked like a puppet with its strings cut. "It's all gone," he mumbled into his hands. "There's nothing left." My mother stared at him, confused. "What's gone, Richard?" "The house is gone, I know that, but we have the retirement fund. We have your pension." He shook his head, not looking at her. "I took it out," he confessed, his voice muffled. "I cashed it out early to get the money for Asher. The penalty was huge. What's left? It's almost nothing. I was hoping a new investment would fix it before you found out." The room went silent again. This was a new level of betrayal. He hadn't just lied about an affair. He hadn't just stolen my future. He had gambled away their entire shared future, the one my mother had worked for and saved for her whole life, and he had done it all behind her back. He had sacrificed their security, my security, and his other son's health for the sake of his favorite child's perfect life. My mother didn't cry this time. She just looked empty. She was a passenger in a car that her husband had just driven off a cliff. "The boy," my mother whispered, her focus shifting back to the child in the photograph. "Claire." You said he was sick? She looked at me, a flicker of something. A shared humanity, maybe. In her eyes for the first time. What's wrong with him? For a moment, I saw not the woman who had hurt me, but a mother thinking of a sick child. I softened my voice just a little. Maria told me he has cystic fibrosis. He needs constant medication and treatments. They're very expensive. Dad was paying for them. But the payments stopped about 2 months ago. I didn't need to say what had happened 2 months ago. We all knew. My father looked up, a hint of his old anger returning. She had no right to call you. It was none of your business. It became my business when you used the money I was paying for your mortgage to fund your lies. Shot back. It became my business when you chose a new house for your perfect son over the medicine for your sick one. The truth of it, said so plainly, hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. There was nothing left to say. There were no more secrets to uncover, no more lies to expose. There was only the ugly, rotten truth, laid bare on my cheap coffee table. Slowly, like two very old people, my parents got up to leave. My mother wouldn't look at my father. She walked to the door, her shoulders slumped. My father followed her, his eyes on the floor. He paused at the door and looked back at me. There were no tears, no apologies, just a look of hollow defeat. You've destroyed this family, Claire, he said quietly. I hope you're happy. Then he closed the door behind him, leaving me alone in the crushing silence of my apartment. The silence I had fought so hard for. The silence that was supposed to feel like victory. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt empty. The anger that had been a fire in my belly for years had burned out, leaving behind cold ashes. I had won. I had exposed every lie and taken back my power. But I was still alone in my tiny apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of the family I used to have. Was this justice? I sank into my armchair, the eviction notice still on the table. For the first time, a tear slid down my cheek. Not for them, but for the little girl I used to be, the one who just wanted her parents to be proud of her. A sharp knock on the door made me jump. My heart pounded. Were they back? Had they come to plead, to scream, to bargain? I wiped my tear away, putting my mask of steel back on. I would not bend. I would not break. I took a deep breath, walked to the door, and pulled it open, ready for another battle. But it wasn't my parents. It was Asher. He was standing there, his face pale and his eyes wide. His usual easy confidence was gone, replaced by a raw, frantic energy. He wasn't looking at me with anger. He was looking at me with fear. Claire, he said, his voice shaking. What did you do? Mom and Dad aren't answering their phones. Tell me everything. Now. Asher pushed past me into the apartment, his eyes wide and scanning the room as if he expected to find our parents tied to a chair. Where are they? What did you say to them? He demanded, his voice a mix of anger and fear. He looked at the papers scattered on the coffee table, the deed, the bank statements, the photo of Leo, and then back at me. For the first time in his life, my brother looked completely lost. He had lived his entire life in a warm, comfortable bubble, protected from every hard knock and ugly truth. I had just popped it with a single phone call. They're gone, Asher, I said, closing the door behind him. And I didn't say anything that wasn't the truth. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, his composure completely gone. A brother. A sick brother. Claire, that's insane. Dad would never. Mom would know. He was grasping at straws, trying to stitch his bubble back together, but it was already in shreds around his feet. I just pointed to the couch, the same place our parents had sat just an hour before. Sit down, I said. You've been the child long enough. It's time you learned how to be an adult. He sat and I began. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I laid out the story piece by painful piece, just as I had for our parents. I showed him the deed to the house, his childhood home, with my name on it. I showed him the mortgage payments coming out of my account, month after month, year after year. I could see the confusion on his face. He had always seen me as the sister who worked too much, who never had fun. He never once stopped to ask why. He never wondered where the money for his new car or his trip abroad had really come from. Have you ever had to be the grown-up for your siblings? The one who knew the hard secrets so they could stay kids a little longer? It's a lonely job. You build a wall to protect them, but then you find yourself trapped behind it, all alone. If you know what that feels like, please leave a heart emoji in the comments. I just want to see a sea of hearts from people who understand that being strong for others is one of the heaviest things you can carry. Your hearts remind me that I'm not the only one who has carried that weight. Then I slid the photograph of Leo across the table. Asher picked it up and stared at it. "He has Dad's eyes," he whispered, a look of dawning horror on his face. I told him everything. About the lies, the bad investments, the secret life my father had been living. I told him how I had carried this secret for 5 years, how I had sacrificed my own dreams of a home so that our parents wouldn't lose theirs, so that he wouldn't have to worry. I told him how they had rewarded me with a lecture about character. He listened, his head in his hands. The story of our father's betrayal was bad enough, but he still didn't understand how it connected to him. He was still the center of his own universe. So, I connected the dots for him in a way he couldn't ignore. "The $250,000 Dad gave you for your house," I said, my voice quiet but sharp. "That was the last of the money from the second mortgage and the very last of their retirement savings. All of it. Gone." His head snapped up. "No," he said. "That was from his investments." He told me. "There were no investments, Asher," I said, my voice finally rising. "Don't you get it?" He lied. "And that's not even the worst part." I took a deep breath. "The reason Maria, Leo's mother, called me is because Dad had stopped sending her money. The money for Leo's medicine. The treatments for his cystic fibrosis. The payment stopped 2 months ago, right around the time you put the offer in on your house. Your down payment wasn't an investment paying off, Asher. It was Leo's lifeline. You're living in a house paid for with medicine for a sick little boy. Our brother." The words hit him like a physical blow. He stumbled back as if I had shoved him. The color drained from his face. "No," he whispered, shaking his head over and over. "No, no, no." The bubble didn't just pop. It shattered into a million tiny, sharp pieces. The perfect life, the perfect parents, the perfect house. It was all a lie, bought and paid for by my sacrifice and another child's suffering. He finally understood. The weight of it seemed to crush him. He sank onto my floor, his back against the couch, and for the first time since he was a little boy, my brother started to sob. He cried for a long time. Not loud, angry cries, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs of a man whose entire world had been a lie. I let him cry. For once, I didn't try to fix it. I didn't try to make it better. I just let him feel the full weight of the truth he had been shielded from his whole life. When his tears finally subsided, he looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. All that was left was a broken man. "This kid, our brother," he choked out. Is he going to be okay?" Before I could answer, my phone, sitting on the coffee table between us, began to ring. The screen lit up, and we both saw the name at the same time. Maria. My heart leaped into my throat. I had only spoken to her once. For her to be calling me now. Something was wrong. I looked at Asher's terrified face, then down at the ringing phone. With a trembling hand, I answered it and put it on speaker. "Hello," said. A woman's voice, frantic and thick with tears, burst from the phone. "Claire, it's Maria. I'm so sorry to call, but I'm at the hospital. He's getting worse. They say he needs the next treatment now, but they won't do it without payment. They're talking about sending him home." The sound of Maria's desperate voice filled my apartment, sucking all the air out of the room. Asher and I were frozen, two statues on opposite sides of my coffee table. The family drama, the lies, the anger, it all melted away. This was no longer about a house or hurt feelings. It was about a little boy in a hospital bed, gasping for breath. A boy whose life was being measured in dollars and cents. The ugly truth was now a real, living, breathing emergency. The consequences of my father's actions and Asher's acceptance of them had a name and a face, and he was running out of time. Asher was the first to move. He scrambled to his feet, his face a mess of tears and panic. "The money," he stammered, looking at me with wild eyes. "My house. We'll sell it. I'll give it all back. Just tell her we have the money. Tell her we'll pay for it." It was the first truly selfless thing I had ever heard my brother say. In that one moment, the spoiled boy I had resented for years vanished, and I saw a man, terrified and ashamed, trying to undo a wrong he never knew he was a part of. But his solution, while noble, was impossible. "Asher, you can't sell a house in an afternoon," I said, my own mind racing, the nurse in me taking over, thinking of logistics and time frames. "That money is gone. It's tied up in paperwork and banks. Could take months to get it. Leo doesn't have months. He might not even have a day." The reality of the situation crashed down on him. His grand gesture was useless. The money he had so happily accepted was like a phantom limb. He could feel it, but he couldn't use it. He looked utterly defeated. His one attempt to be the hero a complete failure. What would you do in this moment? When a life is on the line, and the only solution seems impossible? Do you give up, or do you find another way? This is the test, isn't it? Not the one my parents lectured me about, but the real one. The one where character isn't about saving money, but about saving a person. I'm choosing to find another way. Please subscribe if you believe in finding another way too. Your support is a reminder that even when things seem hopeless, there are people out there who believe in fighting for a solution. Claire. Maria's voice crackled from the phone, small and terrified. "Are you there?" I snatched the phone from the table. "I'm here, Maria," I said, my voice full of a confidence I didn't feel. "Don't let them send him home. I'm handling it. I will get you the money. Just keep him there. Do whatever you have to do. I'll call you back in 1 hour." I hung up before she could ask any questions. I had just made a promise I had no idea how to keep. Asher stared at me. "How?" he whispered. "Claire, how? We have nothing." "We don't," I agreed. "But they might." My mind was clear. Dad cashed out his pension, but people like him, they always have a secret stash. An emergency fund he never told Mom about. "We have to find them." Asher nodded, grabbing his car keys. "They're probably at the house," he said. "Mom wouldn't have gone anywhere else." We ran out of my apartment and jumped into his new, expensive SUV, the car that now felt like a monument to our family's lies. The drive to our childhood home was silent, the air thick with a shared, desperate urgency. When we pulled up to the house on Elm Street, something felt wrong. The front door was slightly ajar. My mother was meticulous about locking doors. A cold dread washed over me. Asher and I exchanged a worried glance and rushed inside. "Mom! Dad!" Asher called out, his voice echoing in the silent house. It was strangely quiet. Too quiet. The house felt hollowed out, like a seashell with the life gone from it. We walked through the living room, our footsteps loud on the hardwood floors. Nothing seemed out of place, yet everything felt different. We went upstairs to their bedroom, and that's when we saw it. My mother's closet door was wide open, and a large section was empty. Her favorite suitcase was gone. On my father's side of the bed, his things were untouched. He was still here, or at least his belongings were. But my mother, she had packed a bag. On her pristine white dresser, next to her empty jewelry box, was a single envelope with my name written on it in her elegant handwriting. My hand trembled as I reached for it. I tore it open, my heart pounding in my chest. Asher crowded behind me, reading over my shoulder. The note inside was short, just a few lines. It read, "Claire, you were right. He is a liar. But he is not the only one. There are secrets you still don't know about the money, about everything. I cannot stay here and watch the rest of our lives burn down. I am going to find the boy. He is the only innocent one in all of this. My blood ran cold. She was gone. She was going to find Leo. But how? She didn't know where he was. Then Asher pointed to the bottom of the note, to the postscript I had missed in my shock. 4 little words that made no sense, yet changed everything. 4 words that ripped open a whole new mystery. A new and even more terrifying lie that had been sitting at the heart of our family for years, completely hidden from view. My mother's final, parting shot was not at my father, but at my brother. The note ended with a single chilling sentence. P.S. Asher, ask your father about your real mother. Asher read the last line of the note over and over, his lips moving silently. Ask your father about your real mother. The words hung in the air of our mother's empty bedroom, an impossible question that broke the world in a new and even more terrifying way. He looked at me, his face a mask of utter confusion and disbelief. What does that mean? He whispered. Is she crazy? Has she lost her mind? He was looking for an explanation, any explanation, that didn't involve the ground beneath his feet turning into quicksand. But we both knew our mother. She was many things, but she was not crazy. She was a woman who had just dropped her final bomb. We don't have time for this, I said, my voice sharp, pulling us back to the only thing that mattered. Leo. The hospital. But Asher couldn't move. He was paralyzed by the note. His entire life, his identity, had just been called into question. I don't understand, Claire, he said, his voice pleading. She's my mom. I grabbed his arm, my grip tight. And Leo is our brother, and he's sick. We have to find Dad. He has to have money hidden somewhere. We can figure the rest out later. The urgency in my voice finally broke through his shock. He nodded, a single jerky movement. His study, he said. He always goes to his study when things are bad. He was right. We found our father sitting behind his large, expensive desk, not screaming or crying, but staring at the wall. He looked like he had aged 20 years in a few hours. He didn't even seem to notice us enter. He was a man completely adrift, lost in the wreckage of his own making. Asher walked forward slowly and placed the note from our mother on the desk in front of him. She's gone, Asher said, his voice flat and dead. And she left this. I have one question for you, Dad. Is it true? My father looked down at the note. He read it, and a strange, tired sigh escaped his lips. It wasn't the sound of a man caught in a lie, but of a man who was tired of holding it up. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. He just looked up at Asher, his son, with eyes that were completely empty. Your mother, Linda. She couldn't have children, he said, his voice a dry rasp. We tried for years. It was tearing us apart. And I made another mistake. A long time ago. Before Maria. Her name was Catherine. She was your mother. The confession, so simple and so devastating, landed in the quiet room. Asher didn't flinch. He just stood there, absorbing the blow. He was not the son of Linda Gonzalez. He was the product of a different affair, a different betrayal. He was a secret that had been kept for his entire life. Our mother hadn't just raised a son. She had raised the living proof of her husband's first great betrayal. Her love for him had been built on top of a lie so profound it was staggering. And her final act was not to protect him, but to finally let the truth out. While Asher was processing this new reality, my mind was screaming one word. Leo. The money. I interrupted, my voice cutting through the thick, emotional fog. I don't care about any of this right now. Little boy is sick. Where is the money you've hidden? My father looked at me, surprised by my intensity. Then he seemed to shrink even further into his chair. He was broken. The fight was gone. With a trembling hand, he pointed to a painting on the wall, a generic, ugly landscape he'd had for years. Behind that, he whispered, there's a safe. Asher, moving like a sleepwalker, went to the painting and lifted it off the wall. Behind it was a small, black metal safe. "The code is your birthday, Asher," our father said quietly. The irony was so thick it was sickening. The code to his secret stash of money was the birthday of his secret son. Asher's hands shook as he punched in the numbers. The safe clicked open. Inside were stacks of cash, held together with rubber bands. It wasn't a fortune, but it looked like enough. More than enough for the hospital. I lunged forward and started pulling the cash out, stuffing it into my purse. I didn't count it. I didn't care. It was the price of a life, and I was taking it. Asher just stood there, staring at the empty safe, then at the man who was his father but not his mother's husband, then at me, the half-sister who was suddenly the only solid thing in his crumbling world. He was completely untethered, a ship without a rudder. I zipped up my purse, the weight of the cash a heavy, reassuring presence. I walked over to Asher and grabbed his arm. He was still staring into space, his mind a million miles away. "Hey," I said, my voice softer than it had been all day. "Look at me." He slowly turned his head, his eyes empty. "I know this is a lot," I said, the words feeling stupid and small. "But he is dying. We can fall apart tomorrow. We can scream and cry and break things tomorrow. But right now we have to go save our brother. All three of us have that in common, at least. He is our brother. Are you with me?" For a long moment he didn't answer. I could see the war in his eyes. The urge to collapse versus the need to act. Then slowly he gave a single determined nod. A new strength, born from the ashes of his old life, seemed to flicker in his eyes. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was just a man with a sick brother he didn't know he had, and a past he didn't know was a lie. "Okay," he whispered. I pulled him toward the door, leaving our father sitting alone in his study, a ghost in the house of his own lies. We had the money. We had a fragile alliance. But as we ran to the car, I had a terrifying thought. Our mother, armed with a new name and a desperate need for redemption, was also out there, heading for that same hospital. The storm was far from over. It was just getting started. The drive to the hospital was a blur of streetlights and silent panic. Asher drove, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. I sat in the passenger seat, my purse heavy with my father's secret cash, feeling like a bank robber and a savior all at once. We were no longer the golden son and the responsible daughter. We were just two broken people, racing against the clock to save a little boy we barely knew, a brother who was the living proof of all our family's sins. We were a team now, bound not by love or history, but by the urgent need to do one single right thing in a lifetime of wrongs. We burst through the emergency room doors and ran to the front desk. "We're here for Leo," I said, my voice breathless. "We're here to pay his bill." The nurse looked up, her face tired and stressed. I didn't wait for her to ask questions. I unzipped my purse and started pulling out the stacks of cash, laying them on the counter. It was a messy, desperate pile of money. The nurse's eyes widened. She had probably been dealing with a frantic, crying Maria all day. She didn't ask where the money came from. She just saw a solution. She saw a child who might get to go home. After the payment was processed, a different nurse led us down a quiet, sterile hallway to the pediatric wing. She pointed to a room at the very end. "His mother is with him," she said gently. "He's sleeping now." Asher and I walked to the door and looked through the small glass window. And there he was, a small boy no older than 7, asleep in a bed that looked way too big for him. He had a mess of dark, curly hair, and even in sleep, his face was pale and his breathing looked shallow. In that moment, he wasn't a secret or a symbol of betrayal. He was just a sick little kid. He was our brother. A woman was sitting in a chair by his bed, holding his small hand. Maria. She looked exhausted, her face etched with worry. As we watched, the door to the room opened, and another woman walked in. It was our mother, Linda. My heart stopped. This was it. The explosion. But there was no yelling. My mother walked slowly to the bed, her eyes fixed on the sleeping child. She looked at Leo with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was a deep, profound sorrow. She reached out a hesitant hand and gently brushed a stray curl from his forehead. Maria looked up at her, and the two women, the two great rivals in my father's life, simply looked at each other over the bed of their shared child. Then my mother saw us standing in the doorway. She walked out into the hall, closing the door softly behind her. She looked at the cash still peeking out of my purse. She looked at Asher's broken face. "I took a taxi," she said, as if that explained everything. "I was going to give her my wedding ring. It was the only thing of value he hadn't taken from me." She wasn't there for a fight. She was there to atone in the only way she knew how. She had come to sacrifice the last symbol of her broken marriage for the life of the child who had broken it. Just then, Maria stepped out into the hallway, her eyes red from crying. "Thank you," she whispered, looking at me. "The nurse told me. I don't know how." Her voice trailed off as her eyes landed on Asher, who was standing just behind me. She froze. Her breath hitched. She stared at him, not like a stranger, but like a ghost from a long-lost dream. Asher, confused by her intense stare, shifted uncomfortably. "I'm Asher," he said, holding out a hand. "I'm Leo's brother." Maria didn't take his hand. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "I know who you are," she whispered, her voice full of a love and pain that was 25 years old. "My name is Maria Catherine. Catherine was my middle name. I am your mother." The world stopped. The final lie, the biggest and most foundational lie of them all, had just been spoken. My father didn't have two affairs. He had one long, secret life with one woman, the woman he truly loved. Asher and Leo were not half-brothers. They were full brothers. Our mother, Linda, had not just raised the child of an affair. She had raised the son of the woman her husband had loved his entire life. She had known. At some level, she must have always known. And in her final act of revenge and release, she had sent Asher here to learn the truth from the only person who could tell him. Weeks later, I stood on the sidewalk across the street from a small, rented house with a little patch of green grass. My house. The one on Elm Street. I had sold it. I didn't want it anymore. It was full of ghosts and lies. I used the money to pay off all the debts, and with what was left, I set up a trust fund. A fund for two brothers, Asher and Leo, to be used for medicine and for a future built on truth. My father was gone. He had simply disappeared, leaving behind the mess he had made for everyone else to clean up. We never heard from him again. From the sidewalk I watched. Asher was pushing Leo on a swing, and for the first time I could see the resemblance. They were laughing. On the porch, two women sat together drinking coffee. Maria Catherine and Linda. They were not friends. They would never be friends. But they were two mothers, bound by two sons, navigating a new, strange and complicated peace. They were a family, a broken and rebuilt thing, scarred and beautiful. They were finally free from the lies that had kept them all in cages. And me. I was free too. I had my small condo, my old car, and my job at the hospital. I had lost the family I thought I knew, but I had found something real in its place. I was no longer the responsible one, the forgotten one. I was the one who had brought the truth into the light. My story is about the terrible price of secrets, but it's also about the incredible power of truth. It's about how the most broken things can sometimes be put back together in a way that is stronger than they were before. My journey is over, but maybe yours is just beginning. If this story touched you, if it made you feel seen, if it gave you hope that the truth will always find a way, please, I'm asking you with all my heart, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to this channel. You are not just a viewer to me. You are a community. You are the family I found in the darkness. And together, we can make sure that no one ever has to feel alone in their fight for the truth again. Thank you.